Attitude Era is arguably the best time to be a wrestling fan in history. And because of Wrestling with Andy, I'll leave his link to the original video and as well as his channel down below. Because of him, we can watch the entire history of the Attitude Era as a PG Era fan. And I'm super stoked for this video. If you guys are, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and comment down below from these two, what was your favorite, the Golden Era or the Attitude Era? And I'm not gonna waste any more of your time. Let's jump into this video.
There have been plenty of popular time periods for wrestling over the decades.
Facts!
From the early TV boom of the 1950s territory scene to the Hulkamania-soaked heights of the
Yep.
80s, all the way to the modern-day Renaissance. But of them all, perhaps none represented a bigger period of mainstream interest for the industry than the Attitude Era. What made
Bro, the amount of old heads, and now this is not me taking a shot at people that are the older generation, but in a good way, the amount of old heads that tell me how insane when the Shattered Glass Austin 316's music hit, how everybody was jumping out of their seats. I have never seen more craziness than when his music hit back in the Attitude Era.
time period so special and so talked about even to this day? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now.
Let's get it!
Begins, well, in truth, there's a debate about
Gold
where
Dust!
the Attitude Era actually starts, with some going as far back as the introduction of Gold Dust as being the origin
Yes,
point.
sir.
But while that may have been
Really?
a very early spark for what was to come later, as would Steve Austin's famous King of the Ring victory in June 1996, those moments still very much happened during the time of the New Generation Era, a period where WWF was struggling more than it ever had. Why was this? Well, after the heights of the Golden Era during the 80s, Vince McMahon's promotion had hit some hard times as a combination of the steroid trial and the loss of most of their big stars led to a serious downturn.
Y'all make sure you subscribe to
in
Andy.
interest. And what the promotion were doing to combat this back then certainly wasn't winning anyone back, as even in the mid-90s, the Wrestlers with Jobs era felt more than a little passé. And it only felt even more passé once WCW exploded in popularity with the NWO angle in
Oh
1990.
my gosh, bro. The NWO, New World Order. I mean, come on, bro. One of the best factions to ever exist.
Six. On top of that, when compared to what ECW, the real game changer of 90s wrestling, was doing over in Philadelphia around that same time, WWF was in danger of becoming uncool as the rest of the industry passed it by. So what they needed then was a shakeup. And that shakeup would finally begin showing itself in late 1996 as people like Vince Russo were brought into the fold. What was Vince Russo's intention for the company's creative direction going forward? Well, he wanted to ape the success of trash TV.
My gosh, Jerry Springer, one of the best TV shows I have ever seen, bro. Some of the funniest clips on YouTube that you'll find. Go check. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go check it out. When I see the clips on YouTube, I could have only imagined how people saw it on just a normal TV screen. Just like watching it for the very first time. I had it lucky. I just go on YouTube, you know what I'm saying? But some people had to wait for this show to come on, and that must have been hard, man. This guy is hilarious.
Of the time, like Jerry Springer, in the process creating a wrestling show in which it would be impossible to look away on account of there always being something wild happening at any given moment.
Yeah, hold on. I gotta pause it real quick. We're gonna back it up a step. Women wrestlers meant nothing back then. There was only a select few that mattered. Most women wrestlers were there to look cute. Like, literally. There for their little scenes. You know, those wink, wink. You know what I'm talking about. Those scenes. Most women wrestlers weren't even cared about. Lita, China, I know there's more in my head, Trish Stratus, but like most of the women that were popular were women that were just hot. Like people just loved that back. I don't know what it was. I don't feel like they cared much about the wrestling part of it. And you guys, hey, if you're from the Attitude Era, comment down below. What were your thoughts on the women's division? I just felt like it was more look-based than it was skill-based, you know? Like, come on, man. That's what I feel like, man. That's what I feel like.
Being something wild happening at any given moment.
I could be wrong.
And the early ideas he pitched to Vince McMahon here would soon see him be elevated to the level of head writer along with his partner Ed Ferrara. Yes, things were now changing fast within the halls of WWF, and this would lead us to 1997, a crucial year for WWF, as it was the year in which, by many people's estimates, the Attitude Era got going. After all, it was here that Raw underwent a visual change, one which would remain consistent for decades thereafter. And it was also here that a lot more reality started being injected into the show on a regular basis. Take the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels feud, for example, a genuine rivalry between two performers who had started out as friends, but who had ended up becoming bitter enemies as legitimate heat was allowed to boil over to the point that it started spilling out.
I've heard about them too. Them two and their beef was real as hell. And that's why you could argue it's one of the greatest rivalries you'll ever see because of how real it felt and how real it actually was backstage.
Out onto TV. Backstage fights, on-screen verbal battles, and even accusations being thrown around about people having affairs.
Yeah, bro.
Very bitter.
It was wild.
And as the weeks and months progressed and WWF struggled to get them in the ring together for an actual match, it all made for hugely engrossing TV. Even if you didn't know what was happening between the pair behind the scenes, there was enough anger in their on-screen segments to where you could just tell this was more than just a wrestling angle.
Facts.
While that was playing itself out, other things would also be heralding a new era in WWF, things like the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Why was this so important? Well, after years of pushing more traditional babyfaces on top, Vince McMahon suddenly struck gold with the anti-hero antics of the Rattlesnake, as he perfectly represented the new direction pop culture was moving in with shows like South Park and music like Eminem. Seriously, Austin's babyface turn at WrestleMania 13 during his submission match against Bret Hart is cited by many to this day as the true start point of the Attitude Era, as after that, things really felt different. Hell, what followed on from here over the remainder of 1997 has been considered by many to be the best stretch of creative WWF ever went through. And another part of the reason it felt so fresh was because at some point during it, Vince McMahon had admitted he was losing touch with what his audience wanted, and so he had told his roster at an meeting that he wanted to give them more creative freedom when it came to developing their own characters moving forward. What a great decision this was then, as it led to people like Mick Foley rising up the card as his Cactus Jack persona finally made it to WWF.
Love Cactus
and
Jack.
As if that wasn't enough, it also led to Brian Pillman setting the template for any worked shoot angles to come in the decades which followed with his loose cannon antics that blurred the lines between reality and fiction to the point that no one could tell what was happening anymore. Seriously, his Pillman's Got a segment this year was so wild, it very nearly got Raw picked up.
Nah, did y'all? Nah. Homie had the Glocky, bro. WWE did not give a crap. Vince did not give a crap. He was doing crazy stuff like this. I missed out, bro.
Off the air.
I missed out.
The buzz it had created, Vince McMahon decided to lean further into that kind of context with things like the early days of DX and the initial sparks of a rivalry which would go on to dominate the next few years when in front of a rabid Madison Square Garden crowd on the September.
Yo, why they zooming in on her? You know what I'm saying? Why are you zooming in on her Yonkers? They did that on purpose. You know they did.
Had ever dared to cross before at the time. Obviously, then, this made for a lot of renewed excitement within the company. That said, for as excellent as 1997 was for WWF on a creative level, they were still being absolutely hammered in TV ratings by WCW.
Oh, WCW was at their best then.
Continued to grow with the popularity of the New World Order angle. And that almost led to the entire ship sinking.
I've always wondered. Hold on, we gotta go to it. We gotta go to it. Do you guys think this had to have been fake, right? His beard? That's gotta be fake. That dude had Sharpie on that. That was Sharpie.
And that almost led to the entire ship.
It looks fake.
As it was in the autumn of this year that Raw was officially canceled.
No, I'm not jealous, okay? I'm not jealous.
From the air once their current deal was over a few months later, with this basically meaning that Vince McMahon's promotion was dead in the water, as no TV meant no national exposure anymore. And this was way before a point where wrestling was such a valuable property Raw would have been guaranteed to find a home somewhere else. But then something happened. After WWF started getting more money coming in after raising the prices of their in-your-house pay-per-views, the boss suddenly found that he could afford to pay Bret Hart's contract again, the contract he'd told him mere months before that he could no longer honor on account of financial difficulties. The only problem, during the intervening time, the Hitman had made a deal with WCW to jump over there. And what's more, he was still the WWF champion, meaning Vince McMahon would now have to hotshot the belt off of him before he left. Yes, what was about to come was the infamous Montreal Screwjob, a story too big to go into here, but one in which the bullet points were basically that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels' shoot rivalry led to the Hitman getting screwed out of the WWF title for real on live pay-per-view at the Survivor Series, all under the instructions of Vince McMahon himself. Obviously then, this turned the boss into the biggest villain in the industry overnight, something which could have served as a fatal blow for the promotion, but which ended up working out great for them in the end when he decided to lean into this perception and make a top heel out of himself. And that, combined with the continued rise of Steve Austin up the card, as well as Shawn Michaels' never-ending pushing of the boundaries of good taste with D-Generation X, created a situation where WWF started
Freaking China, dude. She's dead staring that camera.
WrestleMania 14, the night which is pretty much considered the start of the Attitude Era by the company. What happened here which is so important? Well, it was the night that Stone Cold beat HBK for the WWF title and formally became the face of this new burgeoning
Mike
era.
Tyson.
Of course, getting a big audience to tune in for WrestleMania was one thing. After all, with a mainstream star like Mike Tyson serving as the special guest enforcer for the main event at that show, it was obvious interest was going to be higher than normal. But getting them to stay after the fact was another thing altogether. Luckily, though, WWF just so happened to have what is considered by many to be the greatest angle of all time as a follow-up.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
What was this angle? Well, it would see new WWF champion Steve Austin play the role of a man of the people as he went to war with Vince McMahon himself, the evil Machiavellian villain of the story who wanted nothing more than to get the belt off of the Rattlesnake and get it.
Yeah,
out
that
to
was
more
the
corporate
feud.
champions.
There was 2 feuds of the Attitude Era that I remember. I think they're gonna talk about Rock and Stone Cold. I think that is in Attitude Era. If not, I'm sorry. All right, don't hate on me. I don't, like I said, I'm learning. This is new to me. But I think Vince and Stone Cold, their feud was the reason why Attitude Era was what it was. You know, it made it better. You know.
Dead. Obviously, then,
It brought it
was
up to
very
that
easy
high
for a lot of
scale.
people to identify with the plight of Austin here, especially those who worked in more blue-collar jobs and who hated their own bosses. And it also became very easy for teenagers and young men in the process of rebelling against authority themselves to find a hero in the Rattlesnake. Basically, what we're saying here is that the fact WWF exploded in mainstream popularity at this time should come as no surprise. What would have been a surprise to people back then, though, was how quickly things had turned around, as mere months before, this was a promotion which was on the verge of death, with it literally only being saved by going under once the USA Network saw how many viewers Stone Cold was bringing in and decided to do a 180 and renew Raw instead of canceling it. Of course, it wasn't just Steve Austin's constant battles with Vince McMahon and the hand-picked challengers the boss would throw at his champion, which was drawing new fans in here. No, it was also things like the excellent brother versus brother feud between The Undertaker and Kane, with this being a slow burn storyline which had started off early on in 1997 and which was still peaking as 1998 got into full swing. Then, of course, there was the babyface turn of a now Triple H-led DX post Shawn Michaels' retirement on account of injury, Mick Foley's continued excellent character work across his 3 different
Mankind,
Dude Love, and Cactus Jack, and the rise of another top star in a young
who you know had 3 different character types and they're all successful.
rookie.
Just
The
saying.
Rock.
There's
Yes,
The Rock.
another key factor in the Attitude Era being his
Okay, so I was right. Attitude Era, Rock and Cold. Rock and Stone Cold was huge in the Attitude Era, is what I've heard.
Basically, with Steve Austin and The Rock, they had 2 Hulk Hogans at the same time.
Yeah.
And below them, the rest of the roster was absolutely stacked with star power from top to bottom, with this all leading to a situation where, come the end of 1998, WWF was already starting to leave WCW in the dust as the pendulum of the Monday Night Wars fully shifted in WWF's favor. But then how couldn't they when so many iconic moments which are still talked about fondly to this day happened during that 12-month period? Come on now, aside from Stone Cold winning the big one at WrestleMania 14, 1998 was also the year which gave us scenes such as Mick Foley's insane death.
Oh my gosh, really? That's when it was, dude? That's insane. Wait, wait, this era was gas. All of these clips I see online were all from the Attitude Era?
Mick Foley and Terry Funk
That's
being
tough.
packed into a dumpster and then thrown off the entrance ramp.
That's
and The Rock
tough.
turning heel after winning the Deadly Games tournament at Survivor Series. Basically, all of this is to say that it was exactly what Vince Russo had planned for when he first took over the book. Crash TV, which you couldn't look away from, and that led to big-time ratings for Vince McMahon and company as wrestling, particularly WWF and not WCW now, became the talk of the pop culture landscape. And as 1999 got going, the craziness would only increase, and the gap between WWF and WCW only widen, as Steve Austin's WrestleMania 15 bout against The Rock marked the first of 3 times this pair would main event the Showcase of the Immortals. So much momentum was WWF building here, in fact, they'd even started to get a bunch of WCW talent to jump ship.
Oh,
And
is
you
that
can
Big
tell
Show?
that
Wait, whoa, was that Big Show?
started to get a bunch of WCW talent to jump ship.
That kind of looks like Big Show. I think that was Big Show. I haven't seen him with hair.
And while
Oh,
they
it
were
is. There it
getting
is.
other crazy scenes like Stone Cold giving the corporation a beer bath when he drove a Coors truck down to the ring, the reveal of the higher power after months of speculation, the Rock and Sock Connection's famous This Is Your Life segment, and Mick Foley's iconic first world title win, set to the sound of one of the largest pops in wrestling history, would be continuing to draw in massive TV ratings every week. Sadly, though, a few things would happen in the autumn of this year which threatened to halt all the momentum that the company had built, the first of which was the exit of the show's head writers, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. Why had Russo and Ferrara chosen to leave WWF here? Well, after the introduction of the company's second live weekly show, SmackDown, that summer, the pair became burnt out trying to keep up with the new creative, especially when Vince McMahon wanted them to do this for the same amount of money they'd been getting paid before. So, seeing an opportunity to help boost the now struggling WCW, the duo jumped over there instead, leaving WWF rudderless for a short time. But that wasn't the only issue WWF was going through back then. No, they were also having to deal with the exit of their top star for the foreseeable future. What happened here? Well, after a serious neck injury he'd picked up in the summer of 1997 had never been allowed to heal properly, Steve Austin suddenly hit a wall in terms of being able to perform, with this
That
leaving him
sucks.
no choice but to get neck fusion surgery, something which would put him on the shelf for the next year. As you would expect then, these two things combined could have struck a critical blow to WWF. Hell, Austin leaving alone could have been a fatal strike. After all, the company was already starting to get some pushback on account of things like the increased edginess of the product, as well as the passing of Owen Hart in May of 1999.
Damn.
Though, they had another ace waiting right there in
Bro.
Dwayne Johnson. And
The fact that, Stone Cold, they just had all-star after all-star, bro. The fact that, Stone Cold, he had to get fusion surgery. He was out. Here comes Rock. Here comes Rock in his prime. And one of the best promo skilled guys of all time. A true entertainer. Now, in ring, I don't know if he was all that. I'll be honest, man. He had 2 moves that really inspired people, and it's his finishers. But, he wasn't any fancy person in the ring. He just got it done, which I respect. But his promo skills are top-notch, bro. You could argue the greatest. You could argue, and I wouldn't disagree with you, the greatest promoist of all time, bro.
so it was that.
And then you had
Triple
Triple H, which is
elevated
crazy
to
too,
the
bro.
Top heel, The Rock would slip into the role of top babyface, with this leading to them spending much of 2000 feuding with one another over the WWF title. What was happening aside from that, which made 2000 another year many consider to be the greatest in WWE's history? Well, an influx of new talent brought the work rate, something which made this feel like a second stage of the Attitude Era was beginning. That's right, after the first couple of years have been characterized by a lot of kick-punch brawling main events, something which had partially been done in order to accommodate for a physically compromised Steve Austin, new additions to the roster here, such as Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, and Eddie
Wow.
Guerrero,
R.I.P. Eddie.
some high work rate matches taking place on not only Raw and SmackDown, but also pay-per-view. And they weren't the only big changes happening to the roster during 2000, as it would also be here that we'd see some of the women not named China start to rise in prominence.
Lita.
Specifically, Trish Stratus. And
Trish Stratus.
As well as that, tag team wrestling would undergo something of a renaissance in WWF when the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian all worked together to
That's insane. Hardy Boys, Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, all in their prime, bro. All them youngsters, bro.
set a new bar for the
Just
division during their Triangle Ladder match at WrestleMania 2000, and then their TLC 1 rematch at SummerSlam a few months later. That said, for as great as this was, it would be the main event scene which was continuing to anchor everything. a division which was being led by The Rock and, to a lesser extent, Triple H. Hell, even the retirement of Mick Foley in early 2000 couldn't slow things down, as once The Undertaker returned from his own injury with an all-new American Badass incarnation, it would fill the gap left by Foley. And while Vince McMahon was still playing a top heel authority figure, he wouldn't be the only McMahon on screen anymore, as by then both of his children, Shane and Stephanie, had become prominent TV figures, with this being when Stephanie got kayfabe married to her future real-life husband, Triple H, in order to start the McMahon-Helmsley era angle. Sure, by then, some of the more outrageous characters of the early years of the Attitude Era, like The Godfather and Val Venus, were being phased out because of backlash from parents groups, but the edginess certainly remained overall. The only difference was that, now with Chris Kresge taking over as the head of creative, the whole thing had felt like it had a stronger sense of structure than it had when Vince Russo had been in control of the book. Really, this was the best of everything in many ways, and arguably a high watermark for WWE as a whole, as business had never been hotter, and mainstream interest had never been greater. Yes, back then you couldn't move around.
Bro, what are we doing? Why are we zooming in on her yonkers, bro?
Or talking about what had happened on Raw the night prior.
R.I.P. Eddie, man.
Like WrestleMania 2000 didn't hit, or when angles like Rikishi being revealed
Rikishi
run Steve Austin over the year prior flopped, it did nothing to hurt the company's popularity, as they were so white hot, they were able to withstand this easily. So when Stone Cold did finally return from his injury in the autumn, he was able to walk back into a promotion which hadn't skipped a beat in his absence. Hell, at this point, there was now a question for the first time as to who the true top star of the WWF was, Austin or The Rock, and that competition between the two to be the ace only pushed each to continue taking the company to even greater heights as 2000 came to a close with the staggering star power of a six-man Armageddon Hell in a Cell match featuring the Rattlesnake, the People's Champion, Triple H, The Undertaker, Kurt Angle, and Rikishi. That said, it wasn't like everything was perfect with Vince McMahon's promotion back then, as well it was now so hot it was on the verge of putting its competition out of business. It wasn't without lowlights too. No, while there was undoubtedly a lot of great stuff which happened during it, there was a fair amount of bad too. And we're not just talking about bad angles like Mark and Mae Young's romance, Rikishi's
Whoa, wait a minute, hold up. Bad habit? You serious? Mae Young and Mark Henry having romantic relationship? Hey, shout out Mark Henry, bro.
And we're not just
shout out Mark Henry. I ain't even gonna lie, bro.
Young's romance, Rikishi's heel turn, and the infamous brawl for all, and the overall pushing of the bar to the point that the levels of violence became simply too much for some to bear. Sure, wrestling had been violent before, and it would continue to be violent
That's
afterwards,
nuts.
But because this was a time period being so heavily marketed toward teenagers, it left many parents unhappy with what Vince McMahon was putting out there. Unsurprisingly then, that would continue to be a sentiment these groups held as 2001 came along and the boom period would reach another level again. What no one realized at the time, however, was that this period would also mark the end stretch, and the reasons the end was coming here would be numerous, even if there was one main one. Before that happened though, things would continue going strong as arguably the greatest ever edition of the Royal Rumble took place and saw a stacked field of competitors be eliminated one by one, leaving only Stone Cold Steve Austin remaining. Obviously then, with The Rock winning the WWF title from Kurt Angle the following month at No Way Out, this was setting up the biggest match possible which the company had in the chamber for WrestleMania 17, Austin Rock 2 for the gold. And what made this different from the WrestleMania 15 encounter was that by now, both were baby faces, and both had real claims as to which one was the face of the Attitude Era. Of course, while this was a major main event for the show, it wasn't the main story heading into the event in many ways, as it would be mere days before WrestleMania 17 that the Monday Night Wars formally came to an end, when Vince McMahon purchased WCW for pennies on the dollar. And while the storyline following on from this would be that Shane McMahon had actually bought the promotion right out from under his father's nose and would from there be running it as a competitor once more, it was clear to everyone that in reality this was the end of an era. Why was that? Well, with ECW being gone too, and there truly being no one else to push WWF to be its best anymore, they'd start to lose momentum very quickly. Sure, WrestleMania 17 would be great.
Hey, right now, comment down below if you made it this far in this video, which I do appreciate y'all sticking by. Is Paul Heyman the greatest manager of all time? Yes or no? If you comment yes or no, I'll know what you're talking about. Just comment yes or no.
In fact. Seriously, to this day, many consider it to be the greatest wrestling show of all time, but when it ended with Steve Austin turning heel and joining forces with Vince McMahon in order to win the WWF title from The Rock, It was immediately clear that a huge mistake had been made. After all, no one wanted to boo Steve Austin back in 2001. Hell, he was the reason so many people had started watching again in 1998. So to see him go to the dark side and align himself with the man he'd been fighting for all those years, well, it felt like a complete betrayal of the character fans had fallen in love with. And you could see the effects of this decision almost instantaneously, as within a matter of weeks, interest in the WWF product felt like it had cooled off significantly. That said, there were other factors at play when explaining why things cooled off so much after WrestleMania 17. For one, there was the fact that, with The Rock disappearing to film a movie here, there was no big babyface to step up and oppose the Rattlesnake. And on top of that, there was the reality that there was a definite sense of creative burnout within the company overall now that they didn't have WCW breathing down their necks and forcing them to keep going at full speed. Then of course there was the disaster that was the Invasion angle, an angle which should have been a surefire hit as it promised the ultimate wrestling crossover of the World Wrestling Federation versus World Championship Wrestling. In the end though, with so few of the big WCW names being present for this, it quickly turned into WWF versus WWF with some WCW and ECW guys along for the ride, not what anyone was interested in seeing back then. Mainly though, it was the Steve Austin turn which has been credited with ending the Attitude Era, with many today marking WrestleMania 17 as the official endpoint.
Really?
That's fitting, as if things started with Stone Cold's
Michael Cole. We love Michael Cole over here, man. We love Michael Cole.
Ultimately, though, it's the fact this has never been recreated again in the years since which has made the myth of the Attitude Era so strong, as today it feels like such a unicorn. Hell, the only other period in WWE's history which it can be compared to is the golden era of the 80s.
Golden era.
The era was undoubtedly a boom period too. It doesn't have the same cool factor that the turn of the millennium has in people's memory today, largely because that period appealed to a more adult audience, one who were looking for an edgier and grittier product overall. Yes, there were a lot of elements which came together to make the Attitude Era special, with the Austin versus McMahon angle probably being the key factor, which is likely why so many people stopped watching the second these two enemies joined forces. But even if they left and some never returned, the memories of what they watched back then will continue to live on, as even today, the nostalgia of the turn of the millennium period continues to be strong. And that's understandable, as it was a time when wrestling really felt cool and where you had to tune in every week.
Wow.
You didn't know what was going to happen once the show got started.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wrestle with Andy. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. He has a bunch of videos, bro. We've made multiple videos with Wrestle with Andy. This guy cooks, bro. This guy cooks on these videos, man. Takes his time. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, though. If you did, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I honestly cannot believe this. I'm going to say this. I believe that the Attitude Era is now, I like it more than the Golden Era. Okay? Attitude Era is now above the Golden Era. Now, there's still one more video I need to make. I need to make a video on the Ruthless Aggression Era. So let me know if you guys want that video. That should come out later this week. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Stay tuned for the next video. Peace out.